Yes, yes. Welcome to the ancient world of tabletop games. I am Agamemnon from the historical documentary Time Bandits. This is a report from a fugitive. Sometimes things crash in on you. All the waves hit the shore at once. I bought these figures over the course of a year, it's true. Many of them were pre-ordered and almost outstayed their sell-by date. All of the companies who sent the figures chose the same tiny window and pushed the parcels through it. There were a few more parcels the next day. What was this chaos like? I did a world of unwrapping. First, a few points. This is not an unboxing, but a parade of boxes. You will only see a few figures up close in this video. It's about getting all this stuff at once. I bought these at what felt like the height of supply difficulties and delays. Difficulties and Delays was an early alternative to the science fiction game Traveller, with a focus on the harshness of interplanetary freight delivery, and that is a role-playing fact. Every box was bought at the cheapest price I could find online, with free postage where possible and using additional discounts when available. How you spend your money is your business, and how I spend mine is responsibly, with a budget and one eye on a secondary budget for new storage. Why do I say that? I did an unboxing for my players. They're an international bunch and sat around with their chairs a little way back from this table, in other countries. As I unboxed figures and talked about the goods, I placed the open boxes to one side. Pretty soon I'd boxed myself in. It was obvious that I needed storage for all these new figures, and I'd arranged that over the course of a year. But receiving all the figures in one go wasn't as mad as opening the boxes for inspection turned out. Packing them and stacking them in the upper corner of another room was an event, but at least I'd worked that event out in advance. Another thing worth saying is that you don't need any figures or floor plans to run role-playing games. I've run games with and without, and much fun was had. But if you are running a game table across several stretches of water in at least one time zone, figures and floor plans serve as constant reminders of what the hell is going on at any given moment. I like figures. You might get by with nothing, and that's great. For what it's worth, those who buy figures almost always complain that models are overpriced, and buy them anyway. Luckily, I'm not part of the Warhammer cult. I'd need an extra floor, literally taking storage to another level. On with the show. At the unboxing, we were there all night long. This won't take hours. We start with the one gull in all the world with the power to battle the vampires, demons, and forces of darkness. If you want to play Dungeons and Dragons, consider buying in a few dragon figures. At some dim and distant point in the past, I realized I didn't have any of these large creatures, so I made a plan and gradually bought them in. Embarking on that madness now, I wish you well. There was a before and after moment to buying dragons. After, something costing £50 went to £70, and a larger piece priced at £70 went to nearer £100, and we all thought £50 for a dragon was on the heavy side of the market back in the days of before. These dragons are stored in plastic shells. Sometimes the shell is exposed so you can see the model inside the cardboard box. This makes those boxes more fragile. I tend to keep dragons boxed to limit the amount of dust that gathers on every scale on every wing. Other figures, smaller, easier to cram into containers from the really useful line or compartmented fishing tackle style boxes, leave their original packaging behind. More on that later. By the time I'd made these purchases, all the chromatic dragons were rather cheaply behind me, and I bought those in fits and starts. Here I'm catching up on metallic dragons. Pictures of the dragons don't do them justice. This is especially true of the silver dragon, which my close-up camera still couldn't quite convey to my players in far-off lands. They just had to take my word for it. The silver dragon is one of the best metallic beasties in that series. DAERN'S Instant Fortress was a piece I ignored until there was a bit of a price crash. I picked it up more cheaply simply by waiting. Alas, inflation killed off that plan in time. This is a D&D magic item. Indeed, a replica of the item is included with the tower that it transforms into. You can use this as a generic tower by itself. That was one reason for buying it. Yes, you can deploy this as a specific magic item. As I'd picked up adventures containing the item, there was a chance players would use it, so here it is. The least useful aspect I find is that the model doubles as a dice tower. You can drop dice through the top and watch the results tumble out of the door and onto the floor. Dice towers with closed courtyards are preferable. You'll just have to improvise in this case. There are 2 wild shape and polymorph sets in this video, and this is box 2. I've press ganged a few ogres into service to hide the giant spider. The problem for arachnophobes is that the giant spider's scale takes it up to the size of a regular spider on the table, as if the real thing has invaded the dungeon and is just sitting there waiting to pounce. One arachnophobic player described it as a hate crime. This is a box that's good for a selection of animals. Yes, a druid transforms into a bear. Okay, a villain is polymorphed into a worm. Not a purple worm, we hope. But the main use for boxes of animals would be the depiction of some random wilderness encounter. A pack of ogres. Good for any large creature that roams around the dungeon, especially if you've made up your own strange beings just to keep the players on their toes. Use figures for what they represent. Then, at other times, tell players straight, I'm just using these ogre figures for the bizarre monsters in front of you. Baphomet is a special guest star in any adventure. How you pronounce the name is up to you, though we'll have a strict lesson in pronunciation later. More devils. There was a time in D&D when all the devils ran away or hid for a while. What happened to all the experts who said D&D was so damaging? At least one guy went to jail. D&D is only damaging to your wallet if you buy this stuff in. Demogorgon is also something of a guest star down the dungeon. As you wouldn't meet the villain all that often in games, yes, you guessed, use the figure to represent whatever massive tentacled horror you've conjured from your imagination. Game to game, no matter the setting, find a use for it. I don't mean you've conjured the real thing from a circle of power you've engraved in your floor. The only people bothered about Dungeons and Dragons today are the consumers. Oh, that's quite a lot of people. And here's Demogorgon assembled. You have to wrestle with plastic to achieve the desired effect. If you can't fit the pieces together, take a hairdryer to them for a hot minute. 30 seconds should do you, though. Then slot the warmer, slightly more pliable sections in place. For scale, I added a few figures. Scale takes me to a feature on some of the larger models. Here you see Demogorgon's base, which is that size for the practical purpose of balance. There's an inner circle showing where the figure's base really is, in game terms. And there's the close-up camera. This main camera rig is unusually pointing almost straight up for once just to capture the view. Normally it's a top-down rig handy for filming board games, books, or dungeon layouts. Let's rearrange the boxes to make way for what's coming next. More animals. Some are giant-sized. It's a remote possibility that you'll face a shark racing in your direction along a dungeon corridor, but you can never fully discount the option. At this point, we must turn to the monster manual of another era, Advanced D&D. The monsters in this box are based on art taken from that original book, so they have an old-timey feel. There is a certain charm to these that may leave you cold. I thought the box was overpriced, but it wasn't. It was overpriced, and really overpriced, forcing me on a bargain hunt. And now a slight detour into a mechanical piece of tomfoolery. You say qualish, I say quailish. Let's call the whole thing off. You may say apparatus or apparatus. I've never encountered this mechanical item outside the Dungeon Master's Guide. Someone would read it out to us, and we'd struggle to understand the inclusion of a metal, lobster, bulldozer, submarine, whatever the hell it was. As I have adventures with this item listed, it is up for grabs. Pincers see to that. Here's you-know-who. Am I pronouncing that correctly? Yinoku. This figure, for its size, came across as super overpriced. As soon as I saw it much cheaper elsewhere, I ordered it in. In returning to the mechanical lobster, it's important to point out that the claws don't actually work. Though there is a removable hatch letting you place figures inside, it's off the wall, even for D&D, but I like the idea of my players using it as a taxi. That's exactly what they would treat this as. Back to the classic collection. This is the first volume in a series. When I say that, the side of the box is designed to resemble a book. Box 1 covers monsters starting with A, B, or C. The front is hinged and held in place by Velcro discs. Quickly, I'll detour into a dragon heist box, and that's to show you the beholder Xanathar. On the book that bears Xanathar's name, you can see the goldfish, and these are replicated as figures in the dragon heist box. Xanathar is quite large next to a human figure, but that all changes when you bring in the goofy golf ball version of the beholder from the classic set. There is something a bit goofy about the large central eyeball, but that fanged mouth is no joke. There's the original art, showing how close the sculpt is to the classic creature, and I like it. You only have a few figures in that large box, though this plastic shell allows for the accommodation of winged figures, larger-than-human monsters, and long, wriggly creatures. And now, for what feels like the umpteenth time, in honour of its curmudgeonly creator, Tim Kask, I give you the Boule. The Boule is pronounced Boule. That's a basilisk on the right. If you dress the Boule in sheepskin, it becomes the Woolly Boule. And if this dungeon denizen sings about how you stepped into my life, then this is the Patty Boule. There are the two Dragon Heist boxes. When using figures, I've always said that you use whatever is available. At a gaming club, one box of a dozen orcs stood in for whatever we were up against. Wizkids, though, puts out these adventure-themed boxes with specific characters from particular D&D adventure books, and I like that. So does Wizkids, kept in business by people who look for adventure-specific models. Once you've played those adventures, though, the specific figures become fair game for anything, and you go back to treating them like that mythical box of orcs. Might as well get your use out of them. A few words about the Githyanki set, and the skeletons too. These don't stay in those boxes. Out they come and off they go somewhere else, to a box full of compartments where you fit two figures to a space. The Githyanki set in particular was a price drop. I wasn't going to buy it all, but then the offer turned a bit more special. Do you know Joe Manganiello? You may recall his role as the fairy godfather in Metal Lords, or Flash Thompson in this or that Spider-Man movie. Periodically he plays D&D, and he came up with these themed sets. Although the characters have names on the box, these figures are for your heroic wizards and mighty-thewed warriors. If you're looking for an armoured polar bear or a flying carpet, these boxes will also see you right. I have a bunch of space adventures I'm converting to the Spelljammer setting, and what a shocker, no armada of spaceship figures to go with them. That changed when I ordered these Spelljammer sets. Of all the sets, these are the ones that pass muster as fantasy spaceships and little else. One or two of the more monstrous scale model items could stand in as creatures down a dungeon. There's an intergalactic gelatinous cube, for example. Spelljammer isn't a setting I can run with the lamentable Spelljammer ship combat rules, but I'll cobble something together out of other supplements, and we'll see how that goes. However it goes, it runs with spaceship figures. And that's your lot. Hardly any postage, many discounts, massive delays, but the shops were reliable and clearly still in business. Everyone's freighter ships must have docked on the same tide. Much planning went into purchasing. Up front I scoured the internet for low prices, and behind the scenes I moved storage around to make room for more storage. This represents the largest stint of figure purchasing I went through. I spread the purchases across the year, month by month, only to be slammed by the delivery of everything. My objective was to fill out the list of dragon figures available and to build a Starfleet. An accidental side effect was to provide much entertainment for my regular players, turning a gaming night into a loot session. I haven't done so large a loot session before or since. It won't be doing one as large as that again if I can avoid it. And that really is a role-playing fact.